Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Can someone please confirm whether you can hear me clearly and you can see my screen well?
Can hear you.
Yes. So right now you have done 2 labs on Flutter, and at the same time I have covered very basic stuff on Flutter in our first lecture. So today we are going to do a part on Flutter widgets. In there, I don't have much slides, but we are going to do is we are going to try it out the things that we have, right? So different flutters built-in flutter widgets that are there in build it, and finally let's try to build our own custom widget, right? So that is what we are planning to do today. So if we consider the overview of today's lecture, it will have 3 main parts. The first one will be talking about how Flutter changed. What are the difference between Flutter and other mobile development applications? How it changes, and how to do both presentation and structure in the same code base. Then we will be getting a small introduction to its stateful and stateless widgets, and then finally we'll do a hands-on part with the widgets on how to use widgets to present data, right? So that is the lecture overview. So for an introduction, we can go up to right now. You have, I think, you have the basic understanding of Flutter, and at the same time, uh, you have the development environment already running, right? So it is, you don't need much specs to run this, because there is a web version which you can run. With that, it will be much easier for you to do that. And you have to learn a few different syntax that are there in Dart, but there are many different documents you can use to learn Dart. And finally, we have this hot reload and hot restart, where it allows us to like do changes and see it on our emulator on the web page without having much build time. So this is where we are right now. So last week we uh, ended our lecture with the widgets, so we are going to start with that, right? Just like I said last week, the Flutter is based around componentization, right? That means we are dividing the whole application into components like atoms, right? So that is the base of Flutter uh, that we have, right? Let's see. So if you see something like this, right, there is a profile image, and if you see cards like this, if you're having something here as well. So what we have is basically on top of this, that is a container for sure, right? Then inside this, we can have either, most of the time, this will be a grid. And instead of grid, what you can do is you can either use row or column. Right? Then inside that grid or row column layout, you can have some text in here, right? And imaging here, right? when you add the image, there will be some layout widgets as well, right? So where you keep padding and setting margins and things like this. So if we consider this as a card, right? So in that card, there are different properties we can access, like there will be a text widget and there will be an image widget, like that, right? So the first thing you should be able to do when developing Flutter is to divide it like this, right? So you can get any interface. For an instance, if we take Uber or YouTube app or any other application, you should be able to see that, okay, what is the widget tree that is there, right? So that is how we are going to build this, right? How many different widgets do you have? Do you want? Are you going to like have different containers there? So with that, you need to like divide it into atomic level. So finally, each one of each layout, each container, each grid, everything will be a widget in Flutter, right? So there are some built-in widgets and there are custom widgets which you can make. Like I can build a widget name passing, right? So that can be a we'll be talking about stateful widgets and stateless widgets, but we can do that, right? So I can do that and I can use it in my code, right? Like that, you can have your different components, like the different forms or different dialogues. You can create your own widget and you can reuse that in your code, right? So that is there. So everything in Flutter is basically a widget. So I am telling that again and again because that is the main difference between other mobile app development frameworks and with the Flutter, right? That is the most of the time people get to confuse themselves with this widget idea, because widget in other things means basically a UI component, but in here it is there for all the logic and everything, right? So we have four main categories in widgets. We talked about this last week as well, right? These four main categories are value, layout, navigation, and others, right? So initially, most of the time, we can only talk about these two, layout and value, because navigation one, we'll be talking when we talk about different screens, and most probably week after next, right? So we'll be talking about the navigation and data flows and everything. So in there, we'll be talking about these navigation widgets. So other widgets, again, it comes under navigation, because most of the other widgets like gesture controller, gesture handler, and everything, we'll be talking with navigation as well, right? So that's the basic idea. Uh, so today we are going to get a abstract idea on what are these widgets. So we are not going to create a full UI, right? In this lecture, actually, we are not going to do that. This creating a full UI will be covered on your labs. So I'll be just touching up these different widgets and how to use them. What are the different properties of that? So I'm not going to waste several days talking about widgets. Because of that, I'm going to go touch the most usable widgets today, and then we will not talk about it in a widget manner, but in terms of data handling, asynchronous processing, and other things, we will be using widgets. So you have to start building your own different UIs, and you have to get familiar with Flutter widgets, because when we are using the widgets that are there, widgets means the UI widgets, so you need to know what they are about, right? So then there are two main types of widgets that we come across. The first type is the stateless widget. So that is what we are dealing with every day with Flutter. And in Flutter, we are saying, okay, when you're working on a widget, unless it is super necessary for you to do something, right? You don't go for a stateful widget. So that's the idea, right? It should be super necessary for you to go for a stateful widget. Otherwise, in Flutter, we are taking everything as stateless widgets, right? So in a state less widget, it is just in a widget, you have the structure, right? Coding or anything. In a stateful widget, what you have is you have the structure and you have the state as well, right? So state means basically you can change things. For an instance, if you have a page like this, right, and you have a button in here, you can do some printing and other stuff. But if you have some kind of a label in here, text, let's say text in here, right? By clicking on this button, you cannot just change this button text in the text widget. If this is a stateless widget, stateless widget means it doesn't support any dynamic stuff, right? So you can have a action for the button, but you can't do any changes in the UI, right? So if you want to do changes in the UI, like adding some input field or anything, you have to do it with the stateful widget, because in there only we are having a state. State means each time, like each rendering cycle, we will be maintaining a state, right? So that's the idea. So we'll try to have a hands-on experience in here on stateless and stateful, right? So that's basically it, right? For the whole lecture, this is what we are going to do today. So we are going to get some widgets and get to know about it. What are the properties of them? And then finally, let's learn how to add the image. What are the two different methods of adding an image, right? For most of the things, I'll be using this Flutter widget catalog, right? Right. So let's go there. So let's say, let's go basic app bar. Right. So this is, we are on the app bar class, right? So last week we did something, I don't know whether. Right. So something like this, we added a button there, but I think I changed the code for that scenario. Yeah. So let's go back to the app. Right. Restart that. Right. So we have this application, right? In there, mainly what we have is the main method. So let me make it clear. Right. So we have the main method. So we have imported our Flutter material.dart. So I could talk about this last week. So this material.dart means if we are using the material components, we will be going for this material.dart library. So it is like the basic library for it is like stdio library for C and C++, right? Standard input and output, just like that. The standard widget library is material.dart if you are going for a material app, right? So when I'm saying there, then you will ask, okay, instead of material apps, are there any other things we can use? Yes, so you can use the basic native Dart things as well, right? So there is a Dart library, so we don't use that. But if you are interested in that, you can use those components as well. So it is not material stuff. It is just like Java AWT or very basic stuff that is there in Dart, right? So when we take the material one, it has the material stuff and all these basic ones as well, right? So you have your main method, and then I have my class, and what I'm trying to do in here is right. My expectation here is when I click on this press me, I want it to do what? I want this press me to change this value on top, right? So let's say that value is for now it's 1. For now it is hello world, right? So then I want to change it to something else. So in here I have taken that string as my data holder, and I have taken it as hello world in here. Then for this button press, I have added the elevated button. For unpressed method, I have added a method called button pressed. So I don't have any thing to do with that yet. So for an instance, what we can do is I can print my data holder value, right? Then we can not reload, and we can check that again, right? So you can see in here your hello world is there, right? Then what I want to do is when I click on this, I want to change this text. So in Flutter, right? So I have added this as so center. I have the column, right? In that column, I have what? I have a text and I have a elevated button, right? In button, I have added it added another text widget named press me. So that's it. So you can, if you want, you can put this into several lines as well, right? So since we can add it into one line, it will come back to that. So in here, you can see that you can make it constant. That message is there. So now what I can do is, I want to change the text in here. So what I'm trying to do is I'm going to change my data holders value in here, right? So what is the value? So I'm going to say okay, welcome to stateless, right? So I'm going to change the value in there. Let's have a reload and we go there, and when we click press me, nothing happens, right? Nothing really happens. But what we can do is we can print the my data holder value and see whether that is actually changing. Right. It is actually changing, right? So welcome to stateless is there. So that means for whatever the reason, so we need to know when we are saying, okay, my class is, or my widget is a stateless widget, that basically means what? That basically means my that widget I created does not change. So even though we don't put that constant value in there, so it says, okay, I'm only going to render it for one time. So because of that, when we are trying to access this data holder in here, so actually that data holder value is not there. So they have rendered it one time, so it will be just text and whatever the value that was there. So hello world is already added to there. So they are not using the variable anymore. Right? So that's the issue. So this looks like this. Right? Because of that, you cannot really use that. Okay. So let's get back to the work. So now we know, okay, we cannot use the access the dynamic nature of the widgets with stateless widgets. So what I want to do is I want to make this widget a stateful widget, right? Okay. So when I want to make it a stateful widget, so there are some things I want to do, right? So the first thing is, just like I said, in a stateful widget, we have two things. One is state, the other one is structure, right? So these two things are there. So when we take the state, right? So we have to somehow give this app a state. So what we are doing is we are changing class my app into a stateful. Sorry. Right. So when we are trying to change that, this stateful application should have a what? State. So how we are going to create the state? We are going to build our application as a state, right? Build our application means this build method, the method that gives out a widget, will be built upon a state. So because of that, state, we are not putting like class my app extends stateful widget and build it in here. What we are going to do is we are going to, from here onwards, we are saying, okay, we are going to build it into a state. So let me keep this thing as it is, and I'm going to create a new class, my app state. It will extend a state, but what is the generic type? My app. Right. So we have an error saying my app doesn't confirm the bound stateful widget, right? So that's why, because it is a stateless widget for now, right? So what we can do is make it stateful, right? Now we have our state in here and we have the my app in here, but we don't have the connection between these one, right? So in order to get the connections, you can see you will get an error saying missing implementation of stateful widget dot create state, right? So you can go for a quick fix on that. Right. So you get this method, right? So method is stateful widget create state. So for this method, you are returning a stateful state with of a stateful widget, right? So you can get the idea. So what we are doing is now we are going to return what? An instance of my app state, right? So that is what we are doing in here, right? Now we can check whether our app works there. Right now I am pressing, still I don't get any value. Why is that? Okay, we have created the state, but when we are doing the changes, we are not changing the state, right, of that specific variable. So what we are going to do now is we are going to call the function to say set state, and inside of that set state, I'm going to change the value, which means I'm going to do some changes to the state. So it will re-render. So basic idea is that. So I'm going to change the state, so it will re-render. Right now, we can save it and we can see we get the output that you want. Right. So you can make it more interesting by saying, okay, I'm adding something in here, right? Instead of string my data holder, I can go for int my data holder, right? So I'm going to start with 0. So this is the initial app we get, okay? So what we are going to do is increase the number. Right. So in here, what we have to do is to get you have pressed the button, then you have to call the my data folder. So you can use the $sign and access that variable. Right, then let's try to access like that. You get it increased. And so this is the main part. So in order to do any dynamic processing, what we are using is this, right? So you can right now you can see, in order to access a stateful widget, you have to have a different class for its state, and you have to have a one class for stateful widget itself, right? So otherwise, there is a method of inline creating of state, right? So I'm not going to go there, but because we are not recommending to do inline things, right? So try to have the structure like this, so you know what you are dealing with. So you have the app state. Inside of this app state, you have your full rendering of UI. So that's the idea, right? So you are going to make it and stateful widget. So there are some other part which you can try in here, right? So we have the material app in here, right? So you have the material app in here. Then what you can try doing is, I am taking this part out. So I'm returning this material app part out, and I am just putting the scaffold there. Right. So you can see, okay, in this app, what I'm going to build is just a scaffold, right? So then I have the my app in here. So what I'm going to do is, let me remove this my app for now. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go with material app. And inside that material app, I'm going to set home for my app, right? So home is my app. My app is that we have created. Then we can add the title there if you like, or I'm going to remove that debug show checked mode banner to false. Right. So what did we do? So we are only building the scaffold in here. right? And I am building the app in here. So let's see whether our button still works. Still works, right? So there's something I wanted to show. So instead of doing this like this, what you can do is, so I'm going to create a new class. Saying my app layout, and I'm going to make it extend stateless. Right. So inside that, I'm going to get the quick fix on the build method. Right, in that build method, I'm going to put this material app and see what is the, whether there is an error or not. Right, so we have the material app, and inside that we have to put the return part, and we have to close it. Right, then for here, I'm giving my app layout, and then let's do this thing and see whether it still works. Yeah, so it still works, right? So this is the main thing I wanted to teach you guys. That's the basic principle of Flutter stateless and stateful widgets, right? So if you're working on a stateful something, always try to break it down into the place that you need the dynamic stuff into, right? Because inside of stateless widget, you can put stateful widgets. So here you can see this is a my app layout is a stateless widget, but inside of that you can have components which are stateful. And get the idea. So main app is stateless, it doesn't have a state, but you have a part of that main app that has a state. So only the state will be maintained by that part of that, right? So that is a very important thing you have to keep in your mind, because Flutter allows you to build everything like this. So when you need something dynamic, please get it to the smallest level as possible, right? So what you can do is, if I am doing that, what I will do is I will have the button and this text on a different widget, right? Only those two in a different widget, and then I'll be calling that stateful instead of putting all the other things in a stateful one, right? So any questions? Because this is one part you have to keep, like keep in your mind if you are working with Flutter, right? So there are, all the things are widgets, but when you're working with most of the time, all the things like what the forms you create and everything will be stateful widgets. So you need to know, okay, how to handle the logic. Any questions before moving on to the next part? Right. Seems like all clear. I hope that is the real case in there. Yeah. So next, what we are going to do is, now we know how these things work. The difference between stateful widgets and stateless widget, and at the same time, how you can further do this division, right? So you can add one part in one class, and then you can add the next part in another class. Like that, you can keep on dividing this into small pieces, right? So any way you like, because everything in Flutter is a widget, so easily you can do this. Otherwise, you cannot do that, right? So so one thing we already know, that you know the text widget, right? So what about an icon widget? What do we know about an icon? So you can go to icons. So in icon, you have set of icons, okay? So in icons class, you have set of icons. So this is the icon one, right? So in there, you can have a color and you can have the icon, like the inner logo of that logo, or the image that you have in the icon. Like that, there are set of things, right? So let's try to create an icon in here. So we have the column. Inside that column, we have children. Yeah. So let's add the icon in here. So in that icon, the first one is your image, or basically the clip part you want to give. So you can get it from icons, right? When you say, okay, icons dot, you get all these icons. So let me get alarm outline. So that is the first thing. Then you can set the set and color to the icon. So let me change the color to red. So colors are again in colors dot red. You can give it like that, right? So the next one, you can set a size in there. So let me set it to 200. Format the document, and you can see the icon is this, right? So this is the icon we added. See here, now you can see the icon. So that is the icon widget. So you can put anything in there, and you can change the color, and you can change the size, right? So what is the layout that we are playing in here? The layout is a column, right? So we have a column. Column means everything will be added to one column, right? So one after the other, everything will be added, right? So then we go to the next one, right? So the next one is images. So no, I'm sorry. So here you can see two things, right? So image class from Dart UI. Dart UI means the what I said, the basic version of, not material, the basic version, right? So from widgets, you can get the image class. Right. So here you can see you have the properties. So in image, for image, you can either give network image or we are calling that can be image network or image asset, right? So there are two ways you can go with image, right? So one is image.network, the other one, the image.asset. So asset means you are bundling that image with your source files, right? So we have the recommended way of doing that is if you're like, if you are using images for the main layout, right? So that if that image is necessary for your app to run, like maybe a logo or something like that, we don't use get that image from the network. Network means from the internet, no? So the user should have the internet access to see that logo if we are getting that from the network. So we are getting that from the source files, like making it bundle if we want it for the main layout. So any other things like for a listing or other things, the nice to have images we always try to get from the internet. So now you may ask, okay, why don't we put all the images in the source file so we don't have to use internet at all? Yes, you don't have to use internet at all, but the problem is if you put all the images in the to be bundled with the APK, so APK size will be like 100 MB or higher than that. So do you think unless your app is really efficient and people really want it, do you think a person will install 100 MB app for a small task? No. So we have to trade it off with the source size, right? So our APK size, and at the same time, if it is really important, we tend to bundle it there. So let's get an image. Let's get the same thing and let's put it in our code and see. Right. So just like that, you can get that there. So let me. Right. So this will be the image. So you can set its style. So we'll be learning on how to align or give size to things in Flutter in upcoming lectures. So then we'll talk about how to set these parts in. Right. So like that, you can add the image in there. So how to add images to the asset as an asset. So as an asset, what we are generally doing is we are adding another folder in here and in the pub spec, right? So in the pub spec, you can see here you have Flutter. See, you have the images assets. So you have to uncomment this one and you have to add each image to here, right? So each image you want to get bundled, so you have to add it here, right? So when you add it there, then you can access that from the code. right? So create a folder named assets, put images there, and add those images in here. And just like you call this image.network, you are calling it as image.asset and giving the file location, right? So that is how we do that part. Then all the input widgets that we have, right? So all the input widgets that we have, they are what? If it is an input, it should be what? It should be a stateful widget, right? So you cannot add an input to a stateless widget. So it will be a stateful widget. So we'll be talking about it when we do a form. Yeah. So that we have. Then we have to talk about the positioning widgets, right? So positioning widgets, we have something called first thing. I'm using the column in here. You can see, right? So let's learn about that one first. Right. So in column, what we are doing, what we get is simply this. We are getting something like this. So whatever we put, it will be added to places like this. So the first widget will be here, the second widget will be there. So the children that we have, right? So the children that we have will be there in the child array. So child, and there it will be array because you can add many number of items there. So that's the thing, right? So let's try to do something with that to test the row value. So we have a set of children in the column. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a row in here. Right. So inside that row, I will have what? Children. So children is an array. Then in that children array, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some stuff, right? So the first one is I'm going to let's create our own custom Flutter custom widget. So I get to teach that in here as well, right? So what we are going to do here is we are going to create something like this, which have the Flutter logo, right? Inside that, and we are going to give some colors into this, different colors, right? So that's the idea. So let's go out of this thing and let's create a class my Flutter logo extends state let's widget, right? Then I need to override to override the build method. Then inside that build method, I'm going to right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get return a new container, right? Inside that container, I'm going to put a color in there. Color is let's put colors what? Let's put okay orange. Okay, color is orange. Then in the container, I'm adding a child, right? Child is Flutter logo. Okay, in Flutter, you can directly have a widget called Flutter logo. So I'm adding Flutter logo, and for that Flutter logo, I am setting the size. It has a size property, so size is 60. Right. Now you can format the document in here. Then for children, what you can do is you can keep on adding my Flutter logo, comma my Flutter logo, like that. You can keep adding children. So my Flutter logo is a component created by us. And let's save this and see. See, we get a row in this column, right? So inside this one, in order to show you how column works, instead of this Flutter logo, let me add the column. Right? So column have children. So for children, I'm adding my Flutter logo 3 times. Right? Now what we should get is this. Right? We should get something like this. We have box, we have box in here, and we have box in here. Here we have another tree, something like that. Let's see whether we can get that. See? Okay. So since this is the row, the column have taken the top level as well, right? So because it is resetting the same thing, and it is trying to keep this line with all the row elements. Because of that, when this element has 3 objects, it will be centered. So that is why we have what we have in there, right? Like that, you can work on the row and column. Right. Any questions? Okay, seems like no questions again. Yeah. So the next one is the safe area. So safe area is basically why we need it is in some screens. So even most of the mobile phones now we have things like this, right? We have the screen like this. So screen is there, but we have something like this on the bottom, right? So if we render something in here, it won't be visible, right? Or there are many things like that. So we can't handle those stuff ourselves. Because of that, Flutter gives you something called safe area, right? So what you can do is we are putting it in our body, right? Body means in the scaffold directly to body. We are not putting any widgets. Instead of putting widgets in there, we are putting a safe area. So by doing that, we are saying, okay, it will adjust the content by itself without doing any changes. Right. Then we have to talk about, yes, we have to talk about again about the Flutter widget tree, right? So by looking at something, you should be able to say, okay, this is the widget tree of that specific UI. Check whether there is an example. Okay, we have something like this. Right. So we have the My App, and in there you have your login screen. And this is basically about not fully the widget tree. So this is like a screen tree or some kind of that. But by looking at this, you should be able to create a widget tree, not looking at this specific example. And let me get an example of Flutter UI something. Right. So by looking at this, looking at something like this, you should be able to say, okay, what are the widgets that are there? Okay, there is a question, how to activate hot reload. For every step, I have to stop and rerun the Flutter app. And you don't have to actually activate it. It is basically when you save the page, it will automatically reload. Right. So if you want to do that by yourself, so this is the button right here. You have the button, this one. Right. So with that button, you can reload, but basically when you save it, you can do that. but sometimes there are some issues, right? If you are using an emulator, some emulators, even I can't find out the reason, but when I'm doing this course for other students as well, so there are some machines in their emulators, they don't allow the hot reload, right? So you always have to do a hot restart. So you don't have to build it every time. So what you can do is use the other part, other one, this one, restart. So it will be restart the application. It works, right? It is not building the same thing, but sometimes reload does not work. So then use the restart in here. Right. Then then the next part. When you are designing a UI, right? So this is a mistake we all tend to do, right? Even in my undergraduate ages, I used to do that. Even though I know this concept, I still used to do. I sometimes mistakenly do this. What is that? We start designing screens without knowing, okay, what content we are going to put there. For a login, we know, okay, I want to inputs and one button, and all. If you want the forget password button, there can be one other button. So if you want the social logins, yeah, you can put that. But when you are designing something, right, it doesn't actually only for this Flutter application. If you are designing any UI, first think what are the content that you need to display in this page, this screen. Are you need to add inputs for this, or do you need a table for this? Are you going to display some information like set of item information, like if it is a e-commerce site, like that you need to know, okay, what are the content comes first, right? Content is the most important thing that you need to work on content, right? So after determining and finalizing, okay, these are the content I will be showing in my page, then you can go for anything you want, right? Then you have to find out, okay, am I going for a grid, or am I going for a row and column layout, or am I going for a table there, whether to put a slider there or a radio button? It totally depends on the content that you are going to show, right? So you will have a lecture in the last part about UX, right? Because in the first part, I need to do all these things, so you can start working on that. Okay, but the problem is that panel won't pop up. This panel, actually, you can go to run and debug, and this panel can be here, right? If it is not in here, it should be here, somewhere here, right? So try to go with start debugging, and then it should be there if you are using Visual Studio, right? So I'll be covering some UX stuff at the end of the lectures, but you need to go through this UX laws of UX.com, right? So this is something where you have all the different UX theories, right? For an instance, if you go for fit slope, that is basically I'm saying in order to get a target. So initially we thought, okay, we have a target like this. So if we have in our screen, if we have a target in here, it is basically the time to acquire target is basically the distance from here to here. But in Fitzlow, it says it is not just the distance, it is the distance and the size of the target as well. So it doesn't only rely on the distance, but rely on the size as well. That means even if you add something in here, if it is size is something like this big, then adding something here in this size, so the user speed to click on that item, right? So this will be clicked faster than this, right? So that's the idea. So in that idea, you can get some things out of it as well, right? So the philosophy and everything is there. So time to acquire a target is a function of distance to and size of the target. So what you can get from that is touch targets should be large enough, should have some space between them. Then touch targets should be placed in an areas of an interface that allow them to be easily acquired, right? So it is like that. So there are set of UX laws like this, right? So you can say this Jacob's law basically means this like in your third year projects and second year projects, we are asking, okay, where are the innovation? This looks like the same. This look like the other sites, but in UX says in a different matter, right? So in UX, what we are saying is try to mimic the other sites, right? If you are creating an e-commerce platform, build it like eBay. Why is that? Because we have to understand that people don't browse our site like in their most of the lifetime. So they are visiting other sites as well. So we need to have that thing in our mind in order for people to have it easily, have the intuition to easily access our site. So we should build it alike to the basic favorite sites of them, right? So then in Hicks law, we are saying, okay, if you are giving out too many options, then that will increase the time to make a decision, right? That's why we only have like buy. We don't put all the other options in there. No? So we are adding, okay, buy in one and all the other options in more, right? So you will either buy or go to more and select one of the options, right? So those things are there. So I'm not really going to go into these things in this lecture. We will be talking about them in the later part, right? After week 7 or 8, right? So the only thing I wanted to show, there are some laws like this. So when you are designing something, go there and learn about it. And at the same time, material is a design system, right? So in Flutter widgets, we are using material. So material is a design system. You can go to material design system and see the philosophical reason for doing some things, right? So let's go to material. Right, so in here you can see in material you have different things like you have components, right? By saying, okay, this is app bar bottom, this is app bar top, it's a backdrop, like that. Different components are there. They have given it, right? So chips, data tables, and everything is there. So if you go to this progress indicator, so you can see, okay, they have added the design like this, and you can see the principles, right? So on what principles they have created that, and different types of progress indicators. Like that, you have the for that one component, you have the philosophy behind that, and you have the different types of changes that you can do to that specific component. Like that, many things are there, right? So if you are designing something, you need to have a basic understanding on design systems and other things. But mostly in Flutter, when you're using it, so Flutter widgets are material design somehow, right? So you'll be unknowingly using these features. So that's it, right? Then we already know what is a scaffold means, and then we need to know something that is a list view, right? So you need to know what is a list view. So let's go to our widgets. So list view is something like this, right? So you have several things and like several components or several widgets. So it doesn't matter, everything is a widget, right? By there you can create a list of items. So either you can do it like this, or either you can go for a list view builder and start building them. So we do this. This is as same as a column, right? You don't have the much flexibility in there, but this is the part you need to know, right? So there is something called list view builder. So in there you can build items, so you can get a list like this. So go through this, right? Then you can learn it has its own life cycle, right? So initially when you give the data, it will load the list. So then what you can do is you can go for a stateful widget, right? And that array that is used to generate this list view, you can make that array into the state of the stateful widget. So whenever that array changes, the list view will automatically change, right? So that is how we work on these autocomplete lists and other things, right? So when you are working with data, uh, we'll talk about that thing. The only thing you need to know is there is uh, something called a list view, and in there you can generate a list, right? Then we have the method. Right. Then there's something like this. Every widget, we have something called padding, right? So this one, for this container, let's say instead of going for this child, we can go for the padding. So when we are going for the padding, we are actually setting the padding using a widget called edge insects, right? Edging insects means there you can get different things like you can set all for window padding. There are different properties. You can check it all. So I'll go with the all value. Then I can give 20, right? For the padding. Then see whether they are. Okay, we are only adding it in here. So can you see if there is a padding in here? So let's make it 200, then you can see. Okay, 200 is size is 60, so padding cannot be 200. Let's make it 30. Can hit 0. And you can see the logo is now bigger. So when we add padding, so there will be a padding before adding the next child of this, right? So when we add 10, there will be a padding of size 10, right? Like that, you can add padding to that, right? So you can go to like edge insect symmetric to say, okay, horizontal and vertical padding is this, or you can go to edge insects only, say, then there you can say, okay, top is this, right is this, like that. Yeah, so that is the that covers basically everything what I wanted to cover in Flutter widgets, right? So from here onwards, I'm not going to put much time into the UI part. The next week we will be doing like how to work on a form, right? So form is the basic thing that we want to get data to one place to another. So we'll be talking about the form widget and other things next week. And next week we will be covering on things like testing in Flutter, how to test and debug. And if we have time, we will do a small part on a network call to some place, right? And then we know, okay, from Flutter form, we can call some Java or any other API in a form manner, right? So that is what we are going to cover next week. So I'm not going to get the 2 hours fully for the first lectures since I'm doing this online, right? If I'm doing this in physically scenario, this will already should be 2 hours. But when I'm doing it online, I don't interact with you. So comes to a less number of hours, and I'm planning to do like next week. If the fuel situation gets better, so I'll be try to do this in a hybrid mode. Right, so that's the thing. And finally, as a summary, what you need to know is, so today we talk about the main building block, right? So what you need to do is start building your own custom widgets, right? That can be reused, right? So those custom widgets, for an instance, what I suggest you is take AliExpress or Daras or any other application and try to build that one card where you have the items using Flutter, right? And the other one is we have only created a static customer static object here, static widget, right? So you can build customer dynamic widgets by giving out parameters to that widget. For an instance, you can give the color to that widget. So you can set the color as a property in that widget, right? So that's the idea. So all these things let's try to do. So we, up to this week, we have only worked with Flutter UI. So we don't know how Flutter handles its event loop and why we need to do any background tasks and how to communicate with other APIs. So these things we have to work on. And in few weeks, we will be working on Firebase and Flutter, right? So if you are not familiar with document databases and basically Firebase, it's time for you to start working on that, right? So go there. You don't need to work on Flutter and Firebase together. Just learn what Firebase is. In Firebase, how they are keeping the data, what is the difference between real-time Firestore and real-time database, right? So what is Firebase authentication? These things you need to know, because that's not in the scope of mobile application development. Those things you should already know. What I am going to cover is how to connect Firebase into this Flutter application, right? So that's all. Thank you. So hopefully I'll meet you physically next week. You can leave. If you have any questions, you can ask them as well.